Mastering these four have helped me create my own paintings as a beginner at watercolor. So now let me show you and explain how you can achieve the same with this easy beginner watercolor nature painting. Most of my other landscape videos illustrate what I'll be sharing in today's video, so make sure to subscribe and check them out next. I'll just link them in the description if you need them. Hi, I'm Françoise, welcome to my channel. I'll go through the supplies you'll need for our 4 key techniques, and I'll also link them in the description below. All these are pretty basic, and I think they're great for creating a bunch of different watercolor projects. First, we'll need some watercolor paper. I suggest a good brand and quality paper. The one I'm using is the Arches Cold Pressed 100% cotton paper. Cold pressed paper holds water really well and will work perfectly here, especially if you're still in the beginning stages of your watercolor journey. To create custom watercolor illustrations as a beginner, I find small formats less overwhelming, and I like to use a 5x7 one that I cut out from much larger sheets, which is nice because it allows me to experiment and keep my paper pads for a while before I need to buy new ones. So I suggest to get started this way if you don't want to break the bank. After I'm done cutting my paper, I tape the sheet down onto a flat and firm surface with some masking tape to keep it firmly in place and also create those cool edges even though they're completely optional. Next, I get my paints ready. If you're not sure which colors to go for, I find that checking out color palette ideas online always helps. I do this quite a bit, otherwise I use the color wheel and well-known color combination ideas. For instance here, I simply went for a color combo I know will look nice since all the colors are next to each other on the color wheel. It's called the analogous color scheme. So I went for warm colors like yellow, orange, red, and cooler colors like blue and purple, but I added a tinge of red to these two to make sure that lean towards the warmer colors a little more. I like to contrast my paintings, so I added a bit of a neutral tint shades to my blue and purple to make darker values because my Winsor & Newton neutral tint resembles black a lot and does a great job when it comes to creating darker values out of any color from my palette. You can use whatever you have for paintbrushes, but I think working with a set of round brushes is going to be convenient here. So if you have a choice between large brushes for backgrounds and thinner ones for details and some brushes in between for other things, that's going to make your job easier. For all my watercolor paintings, I also use 2 separate jars of water, one to create my washes of paint, the other one for rinsing my brushes out. And I also use an old piece of fabric to dab those paintbrushes on when I need to get rid of any excess water. Make sure to also have a graphite pencil and an eraser at hand for sketching. Depending on the projects you're taking on, a ruler and some masking fluid might also come in handy. It's all pretty basic stuff for drawing in watercolor. I will not be using these last two here, but if you enjoyed the tips in this video and you would like to see how I use all of that in a variety of paintings and a variety of ways, check out my other landscape videos, and I also have a Halloween playlist and a Christmas playlist I link right up here, in which the videos feature all of the supplies I just mentioned and the key techniques I'm going to talk about. Before we dive into techniques, also make sure you have a hairdryer or a heat gun at hand if you don't like to wait for the paint to dry when it needs to. That's really convenient and I use them all the time now. Now let's look at the 4 techniques you can use to create your own paintings easily. The first key technique I think anyone should start with and master, whatever the goal or project is painting backgrounds. I suggest to start with backgrounds because they will help any beginner understand how water interacts with the paint and learn how to control it to avoid common issues like blooms. And for easy watercolor projects like the one featured in this video and all those I linked previously, backgrounds are a great way to start and get the art block out of the way as fast as possible. They'll have you experiment with your color scheme and they will guide you towards the next step to full painting and towards creating good contrast. Plus they're really fun to make once you're used to the technique. There are many ways to go about backgrounds. You can paint solid ones, make a gradient with 1, 2, or more colors, create backgrounds that look like skies or the sea or whatever else you may think of, or you can just let go like I'm doing here by dabbing several colors onto your page without thinking about anything in particular. As long as the colors look good together and the technique is mastered, there's no reason to go wrong on your backgrounds. My process for painting backgrounds takes several layers, but you can limit yours to just 1 if you prefer. The more layers, the more depth and contrast, and that's why I like layers. Plus, they also help fix small mistakes and tweak things if the previous layers don't feel right. What I do is work wet on wet. This is why earlier I said cold pressed paper was going to work better with the techniques I have for you here. For that, I wet my paper generously with a large brush, Then I dab my colors on there, and I like to have fun with this and I let go, like I said before. The less I overthink my backgrounds, the better the look I feel like. And I think this is true for most of my watercolor work actually. I only make sure to leave some parts white most of the time to bring light into the final painting, and I also make sure to use only highly diluted colors with my first layer to establish a base background that looks neat and smooth. My paper also dries less fast this way, and I find the colors mix up more easily. So once this is done, I'm ready to build up contrast on top of that. I wait for this first layer to dry, or I use my heat gun to speed it up, and I repeat this whole process with a second layer, only this time my colors are less diluted, they're a bit more saturated for more contrast. A second layer I think is important because in watercolor, colors tend to fade and look a lot lighter when they dry, but be careful because when colors are more saturated, sometimes if you dab them onto the paper with a heavy hand, there will be a strong mark there that will still show when dry. So if what you're looking for is something subtle and an even look like the background I am creating here, you can soften those strong marks with a clean and damp brush before they get a chance to dry. I do this quite often, as you can see here, and that also helps me adjust the intensity of my colors and control the look I'm going for a bit more. I let the second layer dry and go for more layers, or I stop there depending on what it is I want to paint or if there's anything to fix and so on. Here for instance, I'm doing a third layer because I want to incorporate my blues and purples to the background, but I don't want them to get mixed up with the yellows to avoid the watercolor muddy look, since that's what they would look like if mixed up, since they're on opposite sides of the color wheel and balance each other into a neutral tone. So to avoid that, I wet my now dry paper again, and I add just the blues and purples over the top of everything else. I knew I was going to paint branches with those colors before I even started, so I'm keeping these stronger colors for certain areas of the painting on purpose so they can act as a bunch of branches that look blurry because they're so far back. In general, with backgrounds, you can get highly creative and do a variety of things once you get comfortable with them. That's why, to me, they represent the #1 key technique to master for easy beginner projects. Once you get the hang of it, not only are you going to master water control really well, but you will also be able to produce beautiful paintings really fast while testing color combos or just ideas, a new brand of paper, or new paints. The second key technique I think works great with this kind of watercolor background is silhouette painting. This is really easy to do since one color will be enough, although you could use more too. The hard part about this can be the sketching part, depending on your own sketching abilities, although with silhouette painting, the advantage is we're keeping the sketching real minimalistic. Personally, I'd encourage anyone who just wants to do watercolor without focusing on how to sketch to use transfer paper if that's what you want to do. I think all that matters is your own goals, not what other people do or think is right when it comes to drawing or creating art. Sketching is easy for me because I used to do this a lot as a kid when I was bored and all I had to play with were pencils and paper. But nowadays, if I want to focus on watercolor alone or if I'm short on time, I do take shortcuts with sketching. It really comes down to what you want to achieve and focus on at the moment, I think. But if you're interested in learning more about how to sketch, I'll link a video where I demonstrate how I freehand my drawings. There you'll learn a technique that makes sketching a lot easier, so if getting better at it is one of your goals, I think you will find it useful. Back to our key technique number 2, silhouette painting. So what matters with this is to use a strongly saturated color, as opaque as can be, to make the silhouette stand out from the rest. You can see here how the elk pops out of the light background and what a dramatic effect it has already, even though the painting is not even finished. It's also important to use a small enough paintbrush if some parts of the silhouette are tiny or require detail. This is when having access to different sizes of paintbrushes gets convenient. Since watercolor dries lighter than what it looks like when wet, I usually use 2 coats of paint to make my silhouettes really opaque, but 1 coat may be enough too. So the color you use for the silhouette should really contrast with your background if possible. This is why here I am using a dark saturated purple on a really light and gentle yellow background. These 2 first techniques alone, the backgrounds and silhouettes, can make beautiful and magical paintings, but there are ways to create even cooler ones with small additions. And that's why the third key technique I found always makes a nice addition to my own creations is the transparency technique. I am demonstrating this here with the bushes or branches, whichever you may want to call them. I use one same color or several shades from the same family of colors for that kind of technique, and I layer the paint from light to dark. I'll link a tutorial here that shows transparency with several shades in detail for further study. Here I am using just purple. The first layer is really light, the branches look farther back because of that, and you can see that better when I start painting the second and darker layer. I keep going for as long as I want to with darker layers, although I feel like here I got carried away and painted way too many branches. I also think they're a little thick, and fixing this would have made this painting a lot nicer otherwise. But at least you get the idea. I let each layer dry before painting the next, otherwise the paint would bleed into the previous layers, and that's not the look I want here. You'll notice that I'm using a medium-sized round brush as well as a much thinner one to give the twigs a variety of sizes. And once again, owning different sizes of paintbrushes always helps, even though it's not a must. The fourth and final technique I absolutely love to beautify any painting is making splatters. I chose to make tiny and discreet splatters here with a really dark purple, but the possibilities are almost endless. You could use several colors to make splatters that are huge if the brush you rub your finger against to make them has a lot of water in it, or make small splatters like mine with a lot less water in the brush. You could also use a straw and create a nice splatter out of a drop of paint, for instance, by blowing air in the straw and onto the drop. There are so many techniques for creating these. One thing I often do is to use white gouache. I love it to create a sky full of stars or snow-like effect. You will see this in many of my Christmas videos, and it really makes backgrounds look even better and it's really fun. You can also splatter masking fluid before painting your background and remove it at the very end. I have used this technique a few times as well, and the advantage of it is you really get paper white splatters that look better than white gouache. A bit different but a great way to spice a painting up is to use salt. I'll link a video up here where you'll see how I use it on backgrounds and what it looks like. So you see there are a lot of ways to add to your paintings through splatters and similar techniques. I think I could go on this topic. There are so many ways to create easy watercolor paintings that are beautiful while utilizing many techniques and mediums, but here I shared the 4 essentials I have been using over and over with fantastic results and basic supplies. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned a few things you can use for yourself. If so, please let me know by liking, sharing, and or commenting. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to help my channel grow and see more of my tips for watercolor. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.